All right, welcome everybody in the world. We here are at Green School, and this is part of the Green Educators Network. We love doing panels about all the things that interest us. This panel is on the compass model and how that can be applied to the SDGs. So we've got a few guests on this panel. We've got Kate, who is zooming in from Phnom Penh. Kate has been working in 30 schools, over 12 countries and 4 continents. She is a IBPYP coordinator, has been also head of school and principal. And it's an honor to have Kate here. In addition, we've got 3 people from Green School. We've got Guste, who is a local scholarship student. He's in his last year. I actually got to teach Guste when he was in his first year at Green School, so it was really amazing that way. He loves the melting pot that is Green School, where he's able to bring together his culture and international culture together. And his passions are in science and engineering, as well as, of course, like so many Green School students, entrepreneurial elements. Then we've got Angie, who is a middle school thematics and literacy teacher. She's been working in education for 15 years, all of which is in his internship, and actually got her first taste of the compass model in 2011. I was totally unaware it even existed. Right on. And then finally, we've got Dan, who is the head of the middle school learning neighborhood here at Green School. He's from Canada. He's been teaching in England, Thailand, and Indonesia. He's taught all grades and has been in education leadership since 2014. His favorite parts of it are integrated learning and projects. So that's our panel today. We're going to jump right in, and Kate's going to start us off with a bit of a share on what the compass model is and how it could be applied.
Thank you, Noman. Let me share my screen here for you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Let's see, can you guys see my screen okay?
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna go backward. Okay, so we're looking at how the compass tool can help you navigate the SDGs, but really how it can just help you make any decision with a sustainability mindset. And anything you're teaching, almost absolutely anything, the compass can help you take it deeper, and the learning can be even more profound. So where we want to start is just letting you know how the compass came to be. So it's a tool from Alan Atkinson, and Alan is part of the Atkinson group. He was impressed by Herman Daly's work. They were both, Herman Daly came to speak at the Balaton group, and he shared this sustainability development triangle. And in the room were Alan Atkinson and Danella Meadows. Danella Meadows wrote Thinking in Systems. And they said, you know what, this is too linear of a model. So, you know, the natural capital is what we are taking in order to make things, in order to create waste. And that system really isn't going to work. What might it look like if we had a more circular system? So it moved into the hourglass, and Alan, oh, can we make this slide move? There we go. Alan turned it into the compass. He said, this is like a compass that can help us set our direction towards sustainability intentionally. So if we take Herman Daly's triangle and we say, you know, nature, economy, society, and well-being, well, we can flatten that and let's see what happens as a decision-making model. And so basically, there are 4 systems conditions for sustainability, and they fall into nature, economy, society, and well-being. So with nature, we want to be living within the Earth's physical and biological limits. economy, we want to be maintaining a vital and prosperous economy. And society, we want to be supporting social stability, equity, and development, while ultimately creating human well-being, making individual opportunities, fulfillment, and happiness possible for everyone. Are you guys with me here?
100%.
Awesome. Okay, so the compass can help us to do all of these, create a better understanding of sustainability. And the more you use the tool in different settings, in different classes, with different contexts and different content, the more you see the possibilities. So this is a tool not to master and then use, but just to explore and experiment and be an inquirer and a thinker, and like, how can I apply this? So I challenge you after this webinar today that you go out and you just use the compass, analyze something through the 4 lenses and see how it changes your decision making. It can be used to create a shared sustainability vision. You can engage and manage stakeholders in a sustainability process. And the compass can work with other tools such as behavior over time graphs, the pyramid. So the compass is one tool of a suite of tools that Alan called the Accelerator. And the reason he called it the Accelerator is because we want to accelerate the growth towards a more sustainable world. So it looks like this. These are the systems conditions which we want to create, and they are framed by the compass. And we've kind of already talked about these. And then, you know, you might be thinking like, well, I teach little kids. How does this relate to me? I have done the compass with kids as young as 4 years old, looking at materials used for different structures. So it can really be used with any age of kids. And as I'll share with you later, it's used in city planning, with governments, with NGOs. So it's helping kids think in ways that they will use when they grow up, that they can use, that will help make a difference to make our world a better place. Okay, so with this, when you're using the compass in your classroom or as a student, you can think about, well, what does nature mean to me? So nature for a second grader might be the playground. You know, here in Phnom Penh, we're in a concrete jungle. So nature to them might be the grass with which they get to play on, or the trees that they see outside their window. Economy. What does economy look like to your stakeholders? What's relevant to your age of children? And society and well-being. So a great way to start with a compass is just to brainstorm what that means at your specific grade level. What it can mean for, you know, say a company or NGO or a government. Nature can mean environmental compliance. So here, I hope you're hearing me say that using these tools in the classroom helps prepare the kids for life, because these are the decisions they will make as leaders in the world. Air and water emissions, waste management, resource use, biodiversity, conservation. And I know at the Green School, these are the things that are at the heart of what you do, your mission, your vision, and your values. And then with economy, the production and consumption, how does that connect to nature? What are the connections within the system? And are they having the consequences that we want? Might be jobs, wages, taxes, investments, society, governance, education, disaster preparedness. You know, we've all just been through that with COVID, right? And well-being. And this is a distinction. I was recently teaching the compass to university students online with Sustainability Asia, and we were having a conversation about the difference between society and well-being. And the difference really is that well-being is really at the individual level, where society is really at the collective level. And so today we're here because of the SDGs. So the SDGs are designed as an integrated system. And you can see that they connect and lead into one another. And what the compass tool can help you do going forward, a next level use of the compass, isn't just to look at your decision or what you're learning about through each lens, nature, society, economy, and well-being, but you can also systems map it. And then that ultimately leads you to see where the leverage points are so that you can decide on what change you want to make. You can take the compass forward to map the SDGs. And this is, you can see here. And then once you look at the SDGs through the lens of the compass, or your content matter, maybe you're looking at products go through a process of change before they are used and consumed. Maybe that's your central idea, your line of inquiry in your classroom. And then when you map out, different things, paper comes from trees and is sold at a cheaper price. You can map the system, what goes where, and find where most of they call these nodes, the node that is the most connected and has the most arrows going out of it can be the point where you can make the greatest change. The other brilliance of this is that you can see the consequences of your actions so that you don't have unintended consequences. You can look for leverage points and find feedback loops. And the leverage point is where you can make the smallest change with the smallest effort to make the greatest amount of change to lead to the greatest results, because that's what we want, right? We want to change the world. I'm just going to check in. How am I doing on time?
Highlight how you mentioned right there, the beauty of the compass model is in simplicity. And when it comes to just putting that north, south, east, west compass up there and putting it in front of kids, it can automatically stimulate conversation. So it would be great to hear from Angie, who has been teaching a whole pile of kids in middle school using the compass model from time to time, how that's working. And would love your input as you hear Angie's story and application of that, Kate.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you, Kate and Noan. As Noan mentioned in my introduction, the first time I came across the compass was on a student trip to Thailand. And on that trip, one of the activities was for the kids to do a group walk together through a local market and the community. And they had a journal with the compass. These kids had never heard of the sustainability compass before. And they were to just observe and note down anything they saw that could fall into those categories of nature, economy, society, and well-being. And these kids who had never seen it before were able to do that very easily. And so that stuck with me at that entry level point. And anytime we did something like a cleanup or something like that, would use it as a reflective tool after students to note what they observed. And then that can be a gateway to deeper conversations with the students about the interconnectedness of all of those different compass points. Currently, in middle school, we do a class called Thematics, which is themed based on the SDGs. So the compass is a really great entry point for those units for students to be able to unpack one SDG and see how that connects to each point of the compass. So for example, if we're doing an SDG about gender equality, we'll start by looking at all of the targets under SDG 5 gender equality and map those targets out within the compass. And it's a really great tool to, one, unpack the SDG, but two, to see the interconnectedness of all of those different targets. And then to even take it to a step further, students can see how that one SDG actually connects to the other SDGs.
And you could see that in the model that Kate presented right there, where the SDGs are the nodes, and finding those relationships, like Kate mentioned, creates those leverage points that you can say, this is where we should act. I'd love to move on to Guste from the student experience. Well, 12 years like Green School now?
Yeah, 12 years.
So have you been exposed to this through the years? Were there any moments you're like, this is what I want to look into? And how does it apply to your 12th year in Green School?
Thank you, Baknawan. Yeah, with the sustainability compass, we've, like, as Green School students, the earliest I can remember using it was in primary school, 5th grade. We were framing our footprints, which is our capstone project to graduate into middle school. And like Angie mentioned, it's such a intuitive tool where, you know, anybody can just pick it up and understand these different points of nature, economy, society, and well-being. But every year it would sort of get updated for me, because there's even more use to it than just framing, looking at an issue from these 4 lenses, that they're also interconnected. So that's one of the key uses of the compass for me, is that it's not looking at an issue through just these 4 frames, but how they would interconnect within each other. Systems thinking and finding those leverage points of how can I do the smallest amount of action to yield the greatest amount of results by these connected issues. With the introduction Faknawan mentioned, one of my projects is with my friends, we made these wallets out of used rubber tires and also clothing waste. And with this project, our goal was to tackle all of these issues, but also in a way where we can create this sort of action and yield from the nature side, economy, society, and well-being. And how we do that is that we can enable the local communities, provide jobs, stimulate the economy, but also keep nature in mind by reducing waste and using something that is considered waste and giving it value again. And through society and well-being, we show and we empower the people that there is this value in this waste, and it can be turned into a product and turned into something cool. So that's one of the projects where the compass was sort of at the center of our thinking.
So good. Now, both of you shared some good examples where it could be used as an educator in the classroom and as a student on your own individual projects. When I was chatting with Dan before this, he mentioned that it also can be used as a planning tool among the educators, and also recognizing, like any tool, it has its limitations. You want to share a bit about that, Dan?
Yeah, thank you. From our position, Angie in middle school with us, we really focus on the sustainability compass in term 1 as an exposure tool to students, because once they see this not only in a thematics class based around the SDGs, but when it's presented in their literacy classes, science classes, green studies classes, students really begin to develop the skills to work with this compass and understand how it can be best utilized as a tool. So when we are working in term 1, we really focus on giving students the opportunity in multiple classes to get the exposure, to get the understanding, to build the skills they really need to build this interconnectedness that the compass provides. And that has shown great benefit throughout the year, especially when you're starting something like term 1 of building that skill, or critical thinking skills, or community. When there's a high emphasis on it, it really gives the opportunity for students collectively across their subjects to align on a topic and really understand and dive into a resource like the compass, to use it in their schooling, but also in their everyday lives. Like Angie said, as students enter restaurants or they're involved in trying to create their own businesses, the compass is something that comes to mind for them to ensure that they are thinking of all different types of perspectives as they approach a new endeavor, which is really important. And then me and Noan talked about, as a leadership model, whether it's managing people or managing a school in general, how could we apply, or do we apply, a concept of using the sustainability compass in what we do, which was interesting, because I would say putting it down on paper and having it explicit, okay, here's the compass, are we considering all aspects of it or not, is something that we wouldn't do. But as people who kind of live by this model and teach this model, I think subconsciously it is on all of our minds. So we do find ourselves having discussions of these 4 different elements within leadership talks or within our management of our people. So it is something that's really interesting to see how wide and how diverse the application can really be, whether or not that's putting it on paper and having students label it, or whether it's in your mind subconsciously making connections that you might not have been skilled up or trained to before. So yes, thank you for sparking that discussion with us.
I'm going to throw this back to Kate, because you mentioned kind of developing an intuitive sense of what the compass model is and being able to do that. That might be partially because of the school that we're in and how we're working here. What I'm curious about is, Kate, as somebody who moves through a whole variety of schools, have you found that a lot of it isn't intuitive in other schools, and it really helps to have a concrete model in front of you?
Okay, I have like 2 answers to this question. So I was part of the team at Prem International School in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where this started. So yeah, and is it Angie? I think you were probably working with the barge.
Yeah, we had gone on the barge. This was part of the barge trip where I was introduced to the compass.
Yeah. So there is a level. And when we first made one of the first workshops ever for getting the tools into the hands of teachers, which is our mission. Our mission is to get these tools into the hands of 1 million teachers. So thank you to the Green School for helping us to get the word out. Woohoo! Because we know it's going to make the world a better place. But there is something that is different when a whole school embodies the tools. So at Prem, I didn't know at the beginning what was just things we did at Prem, at the international school, and what were compass. It was when I went to the first training that we had there through Air Coast funding, and I realized, oh, these are actually tools that sit outside of education. And oh, these tools are actually used by governments, and just like Dan said, in a wide, it can be applied to almost anything you are doing, even to your own personal finances or a decision you have to make about a job, right? So that's one answer, is that yes, when you have a school that embodies sustainability, the amount of depth with which the students are going to understand and embed and embody this sustainability mindset that Dan was referring to, where it just becomes part of what you do. I know that from working quite closely with Kathleen, who used the compass tools at UWC SEA, which is United World College, Southeast Asia. She, with using it over years, when they would go on a trip, to an island in Indonesia, kids would automatically at grade 5 start talking about, what lenses are we looking through? What's happening with the nature around us? So there is a depth that you can go to when a whole school takes it on. For example, at Prem, the head of school at the time was Maxine Driscoll, and she wrote the strategic plan through the lens of the compass. You have a question, go ahead.
Not at all. Just talking about that as somebody who's writing a strategic plan to the compass, it definitely develops a holistic sense. How would that be something that you could extend beyond just a leadership decision to take that model and apply it? Like, how did she embody that beyond just her own understanding to the educators who are actually going to implement a strategic plan like that?
Well, I think training is key too. So, like having a diffusion model within your school where your teachers are getting trained and then teachers are training other teachers within your school. And then it becomes living and breathing. But if we take the leadership and the leadership's using it to make decisions, that's really important. And that's why in part of our history, we have had a leadership track, an educator empowerment track, a youth empowerment track, because we can use the compass at several different levels. What it looks like just below the management level, like if you have a curriculum coordinator, I've helped a specific international baccalaureate PYP coordinator to analyze her program of inquiry, which is the units that are taught vertically and horizontally from early years, the 3-year-olds to grade 5, through the lens of the compass. And if you have the teachers, if admin is using the compass to make decisions and the teachers feel that coming down and middle management is using it, you see the benefits and the possibilities that are quite motivating for you to use it in your practice as well. But what will be the seller, the kicker, is when you see your kids thinking amaze others.
That's an awesome segue into a question that we had before this started. This comes from Darcy Lun in Shanghai. He said, I'm really familiar and love the tool, but he wanted to ask if you guys could share stories of the light bulb moments when kids really understand this interconnectedness. Have you got any stories where you kind of got to see that, educator and student panel?
Well, I might not have a student one, but again, as a lifelong learner, I think I just took on a new perspective this time as we were having this discussion, because as Kate was talking about applying this down to 3-year-olds, in my head, not having worked with primary or earlier students and trying to utilize the compass in that context from our lower education, I was like, yeah, how do you put like some complexity of words like economy and society into that classroom and make it age appropriate for those students? And she brought up an amazing example of, okay, the grass you play on is nature. And again, typically nature is the one that's the easiest for individuals, teachers, and students to apply. And then in my head, on a side note, I was like, okay, how would I do that for economy and society and well-being? In my head, I was like, okay, if a student gets like an allowance, is that their economy? And I was like, is that how it's disseminated to students? And then I went on, I was like, is society like the people in the grocery store? Like, how do you build and make those connections for student learners that are so that it's relevant to them? And is well-being like emotions, like just talking about happiness or sadness, as simple as that. So even for me, understanding again how that compass can be brought down to our younger learners was like a light bulb moment for me just now to be like, oh, have I really thought about that? No, I haven't, but could I do it this way? Which was something cool for me to experience.
To add on to that, while Dan was talking, I got my light bulb moment. And I've building on a resource from Kathy Berger-Kay's Complete Guide to Service Learning. She recommends building service connections into activities like literature circles. So our literacy teachers at our school, we've adapted a role into our literature circles where students in the group have a compass connector or analyzer. And so the proud moment is actually many proud moments where every single student in my class is able to get up and to make a connection between something that they have read in a book to a specific point of the compass and analyze positive and negative impacts, and thinking that these kids, the students I teach are 13 years old, that they're able to think at this level is just absolutely amazing. And every single one of them can do it. And it comes from, like Dan said, it's a whole school approach. Like Guste said, he's introduced to it since elementary school, but it's never too late to start getting kids to use the tool and to develop those thinking skills that come along with it.
Yeah. The like with the compass, what I find most interesting, and Kate mentioned this earlier, is that it also works with other tools. And it's actually quite a coincidence, because for my high school social studies class, we're learning systems thinking. And we're really looking deep into these models and these tools where we can frame issues and frame certain things. And the compass model was what we started with. And we acknowledge that there are limitations. For example, like for all of us, it's pretty intuitive what nature may be, but economy, society, and well-being can be a little bit more conceptual and like abstract. But with assistance of other tools, for example, we were looking at the threefold social organism and how that can be implemented within the compass system. And here in Bali, for me, that light bulb moment is that we have our own similar system where we can frame issues. That is our key philosophy, that is the Trihita Karana, our relationship with God or spirituality, the individual self and self-fulfillment, our relationship with other people, other human beings, where that could be society, or economy, and our relationship with nature and the environment. And seeing that also connected with my own culture and my own beliefs is really interesting. And that this tool is something that we as humans have thought about since we could start thinking and start arranging ourselves as organisms. It's something that's really built into us and is really useful to tap into making, everyday, day-to-day decisions, or even starting your own business, or planning a school, or teaching a class, which I find is really cool.
Amazing. I noticed in the questions that came up before this, there's one from Lucia Bronzoni in Lima, and somebody just threw it in the chat, and I think it's one well worth addressing. Kate, you might want to start us off here, and it's, how can we actually apply the compass to what they call drier topics? I guess literacy doesn't fall under that. They said like math and physics, and one mentioned here chemistry. So any thoughts? First of all, I just got to say, those are not dry topics. They're awesome. But then secondly, what would you say to that, Kate?
Well, I think this is a fantastic question. And I would go back to what we were talking about, relevance. So where would it be relevant? What are the decisions being made in real life in physics? What is physics being used for? What are the ethical decisions that people in the physics world grapple with? Could you take a real world application? So I'm not a physicist or a chemist, but I can imagine that, like, your case studies, right? Take a case study. Would it have been a different decision based on the compass? What amazing thinkers are you going to have if they can analyze and argue back and forth about different decisions that are being made by people in the field today?
It's amazing. And I'm just thinking, direct application, we're launching constellations of satellites for internet. That's a great question. Is that, when you look at it through the compass model, something that actually is going to have the impact environmentally, socially, that goes well beyond the impact negatively that might be applied there? And then another question that I think is a really good one, or did you have anything more to add to the dry topics one?
I just, so I would feel like science is a place where it can be applied quite well. My first thought always when I try to integrate math and science comes to like roller coasters. So as we were talking about this topic, I was like, okay, imagine someone's building a theme park. Obviously that's got nature involved, as you're probably taking up green space. But then it's like the society, well-being, and economy part. It's like, do we build the biggest, fastest, newest roller coaster? Is that going to keep everyone safe? Is that going to make people happy? Is that going to make us the most money? How much like gravitational pull can we put on a human's body? So it like all combines in an excitable way for me, of different avenues that you can take a simple concept like building a theme park in a large city. So that's just something extra to add that comes to mind.
I would like to just emphasize that I think when it comes to project-based learning, the compass is a no-brainer. It's so just intuitive as part of that process. If you're like, today we're going to learn fractions, maybe a little harder. So it really asks questions about how we teach in a bigger perspective than just, can you apply this to a math lesson? This question I liked as well. It was asking what kind of challenges you faced when applying the compass model. Like, actually, Guste, I'd love you to start this one because you said it comes up again and again. Is there moments where kids are like, we've done this already?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's an exercise that we're used to and we like it's done before, but now it comes to how like we can think about it in a different perspective, you could say. Because, for example, one thing that happened in our class was we were looking at the issue of, which is a relevant issue in Indonesia, the recently built motorcycle racing track in Lombok. And we're thinking about that through the lens of the compass. But when we got to economy, like nature, it was really easy. Like it impacted the nature in this way. It took up green space. But with economy, it was defining what economy is, right? Is it just the circulation of money? Is it just that money being earned and that money being spent? Or is it also the goods and services which are provided through a certain project or a certain thing? And then with that, looking at society, is that just the government? Is that the public sector, or is it the individual people involved that live in Lombok, for example, that are actually affected by the construction that's going on? And looking at well-being, how are these individual people affected, but also like, is it even healthy in the first place, right? And looking at these things and really creating a definition for them versus just this abstract idea of the economy, like the stock market, something like that. Like the economy is much more we can break it down even further to that it's the goods and services being provided. And after realizing that, and that money, it's more than just money, it gives a better perspective into thinking about the compass.
Awesome. I'd love to move this question to you, Kate, because I'm sure having so much experience with this, you've seen some of the roadblocks. What kind of roadblocks have you noticed? And what are some of the strategies that you use to overcome those?
Sure. So I think one of the roadblocks to using the compass is just well, can I just say before I go on, Guste, how amazing are you? like, listen, that, I forget who said it in the chat, but what are the aha moments? It's when you have a student that can speak intelligently on a panel of adults. Like, well done, like the tools. And that is really why we do this, right?
Worldwide applause for Guste.
I wouldn't be here without my teachers,
Okay.
so I owe it to them.
Fantastic. Okay, so back to our question about the roadblocks. And I'll tell you a story if we have time for a short story. I had the fortuitous opportunity of teaching 4-year-olds that I then had again as second graders. And I used the compass with the 4-year-olds, and we looked at a book called Me, Oliver Bright. And we were, it's a story about a child, a dad, and a grandpa, and how they lived differently in 3 different time periods. And this was a unit on where we are in time and place. And so we were just sorting out what it looked like, nature, economy, society, and well-being for those three people, right? The child, the dad, and the grandpa. Okay, so that was then. We really had the sorting. So I get these kids when they're in grade 2, and they already know the tools, and we've been together and we've got the relationship. And so we're doing a unit on how we express ourselves, and the artists use art to send messages. And we took New Yorker articles, and not articles, New Yorker covers, the covers of New Yorker magazines that had art, and it had some criteria that had nature, society, and represented kids' lives, right? And I put them on big chart paper, and we were analyzing what messages might be from each side of the compass. One of the obstacles that it's not like an obstacle, but like a challenge, is when I realized in that lesson, as we had guests coming through, and they were like, oh my gosh, the kids are absolutely amazing. I can't believe second graders can analyze art like this, because they were able to speak about it on a level that was so much deeper, because, it's like taking the I think, I wonder routine to the next level, because they've got some content, they've got meat around what they're looking for. But the challenge was I hadn't been having them connect the messages. So we use what Guzde said, like taking it the step further. So I think a challenge is when the compass is used superficially or incorrectly. And to really know and learn about the possibilities so that it is used to its full extent. Does that make sense?
Makes 100% sense. Oh, getting some messages from the mission control here. So one more thing that just wanted to cover here. I think we covered most of these. There is one that asks how you could build consistency and sustainable development when we're surrounded by materialistic ways. It's a pretty complex question. And actually, it lends to a piece where, do you feel that the compass model actually allows us to go beyond just looking at sustainable development goals, but critiquing them even? Have you guys had that thought?
I think you could definitely do some really higher level thinking exercises and making connections with that to dissect all the targets of the SDGs and make connections and identify possible gaps based on their students' or organizations' own experiences and knowledge. I honestly think, like, as Kate has pointed out in her introduction of it, the compass can be used in so many different ways on so many different levels to make connections. And as Guste said, in connections with other systems thinking tools. So starting and connecting it, like looking at the compass and then maybe connecting it to an iceberg model to dig deeper if it is being used more superficially. This is what we see at the surface. What's below that? That's my take on it.
Go for it,
And
Chris.
yeah, like Kate mentioned, one of the biggest struggles is I guess, using it in a more simple manner, right? Like going back on that, it's like in class where we're given this model, but we don't recognize its interconnectedness, and we just look at the issue. Okay, it's time to look at it through nature, time to look at it through economy, rather than really seeing how these things are interconnected. And where this becomes an issue is that if we look at our world today, some things are prioritized over other things. Like there is less of an emphasis on nature and a lot of emphasis on economy and maybe the social side, for example. And I feel like another really key message of the compass model is this idea of a balance. And I feel like that's how we should approach these SDGs, with an idea of how these things are interconnected, but also how they need to be balanced. For example, when one thing is prioritized over another, like maybe the needs or interests of one body, then there's a negative impact to that.
Yeah, that brings one of my observations is that, like Dan mentioned, nature seems kind of intuitive. People understand how to say, yeah, what is the environmental impact on this, both positive and negative. Economics, also people right away go to a more superficial version of economics. How do you make this actually make money or sustain itself financially? And this is the piece where I feel you spoke to so well, which is often when we're decision making, we aren't looking for balance. We have a hierarchy and we go, economics needs to make sense first, and then we'll talk about environment, social, and well-being. That's a challenge. How to shift that mindset, that's, I guess, part of our role as educators. Part of what we're hoping to bring more light to using things like the compass model. Any last words on kind of that challenge that we're facing, the wicked problem there? Kate?
Sure, I'm always happy to speak. For me, what you're mentioning and bringing up reminds me of the power of role play. And it happens in some of our other tools as well, especially the amoeba. So I'm just name dropping some tools so people will be super curious and interested to find out more. But when you're setting up a class discussion or talking about that, issue of, is this space program sustainable? You can give your students roles, to argue from. So one of the things we love to do is in one of our old workshops, talk about an initiative brought on by the parent council that they're going to build a new playground. And then you have somebody in nature that's for it and somebody in nature that it's against it. And then somebody in economy that's for it, somebody that's against it. And you set up these dynamics, these areas where kids are using the compass as a tool to debate and really dig in deep into the concept and maybe take on a role that they don't agree with, that they have to argue about, which leads to your, I know at the Green School, you have like relevance and empathy in your teaching methods. It really leads to those 4 key areas, which I don't have memorized, but you will.
That's actually a great outro. So those are called the real principles, and it is part of Green School's fabric, but a lot of that you could learn a ton about through taking the Green Educators course. We have a foundations course that's online and allows for great interactions there. You also have a ton of courses being offered through Compass Education that you can take to deepen your knowledge and explore some of those other tools that Kate brought up. So this is just the start of you, global audience, and your chance to engage and deepen your understanding of what I think are pretty fundamental tools.
I have taken both the online Compass Level 1 course, the in-person Green Educator course, and the online Green Educator course. Compass is there in all of them, and it definitely they're valuable experiences.
Yeah, we love having a bit of a cheerleader in the mix. So thank you everybody for joining. Thanks so much, Kate, for popping in and being our expert on this panel. Any final shout outs to anybody you guys want to offer?
No, thank you for the final activity. Give the kids something to debate tip, though. That might get used as quickly as today.
I'm totally going to do that tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Happy to be involved.
All right. Have a great one, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.